The Hawaiian people have lived on the islands for more than 5 centuries and had no resistance to the new plagues believed brought by the crew of Captain Cook. One outbreak of smallpox killed 6,000 Hawaiians. Another plague was leprosy. In Hawaiian, Kalipapa means the flat plain. This 4-square-mile inaccessible flat peninsula is surrounded by the world's largest cliffs, towering up to 3,000 feet, and became a prison for those infected with leprosy. The peninsula has 2 villages, Kalawao and Kalipapa. As leprosy was spreading through the islands, King Kamehameha V worried that this plague would completely wipe out the Hawaiian population and ordered all persons believed to have contracted this disease be forcibly sent to exile here. Families were separated. Royalty were sent with the poor. There was no cure. They were sent here to die. In 1866, the first 142 men, women, and children were captured and banished to this colony. Many would never see their families again. These first boatloads of people were dumped on the Kalawao side of the peninsula, and the ocean could be treacherous. Some captains would encourage the lepers to jump and swim for it, and many of them drowned. Once on shore, there was nowhere to live. Up to 8 people would live in a 12-foot square room or lived outdoors. 7 years later, in 1873, Bishop Louis Maigret met with a group of priests in Hawaii expressing a dire need for a priest at the colony that now had 700 lepers. 4 priests volunteered, and Father Damien from Louvain, Belgium, was the first to go on a rotating basis. 1 week later, Father Damien, at the age of 33, and the bishop were on their way to Kalopapa with cattle and 50 lepers. When Damien came to shore at Kalawao, there was no place for him to sleep. So for the first few weeks, he slept under a pandanus tree next to a small chapel built there in 1872. Nobody knew how the disease was spread, so Father Damien was told not to eat with or touch the lepers. There was lawlessness in the colony, and Father Damien brought a sense of law and order to it, and the patients over time began to feel a sense of security. The patients accepted Father Damien, and he knew they needed a priest that understood their living conditions, so he decided to stay there permanently. Damien grew up on a farm in Belgium where he learned carpentry skills from his father. With those skills, he built many homes for the lepers who had no place to live and made hundreds of coffins. In his 16 years, he dug 1,300 graves. With the help of the lepers, together they were able to build to the small chapel there a large addition to construct St. Philomena Church on the Kalawao side of the peninsula. Many of the lepers could not hold a hammer, so they would strap one on to hammer nails. Father Damien also built homes, chapels, and hospitals on the island, as well as building the first church in Kalipapa, Our Lady Health of the Sick. Damien taught his people how to farm, raise animals, and play musical instruments. Being a good singer, Father Damien formed a church choir and organized sport teams for the youth. Father Damien walked approximately 10 miles a day, visiting the patients, bathing their sick bodies, and dressing their ulcerated sores. The stench was so bad from the decaying flesh, he would become nauseated. Not wanting the patients to see him nauseated, he began to smoke a pipe to overcome the odor. In 1880, Father Damien wrote, "Since I have been here, I have buried from 190 to 200 people every year. There are many empty places in the church, but in the cemetery there is hardly room left to dig graves. Damien, knowing he was not to share cups or food with the lepers, would share his pipe with the patients and eat off the same plates. He felt it was important to them to feel he was a part of his flock. In 1883, Damien wrote his parents, "My greatest pleasure is to serve the Lord and his poor sick children rejected by other people." In 1873 in Norway, Dr. Gerard Hansen discovered the germ Mycobacterium leprae. This chronic and infectious germ caused leprosy. It eats the skin, affects the nerves and the eyes. It was discovered the disease was transferred by saliva and by direct contact. Leprosy now is also known as Hansen's disease, after Dr. Hansen. In 1884, Father Damien noticed a problem on himself. It was leprosy. And in 1886, the Board of Health in Hawaii wrote into the patient's book, number 2886, Father Damien of Belgium, 45 years old, of Kalawao, leper. He suffered for 4 years and got his strength from the Holy Eucharist. He wrote a letter to his brother, Father Pamphile, in Paris and said, "I am gently going to my grave. It is the will of God, and I thank him very much for letting me die of the same disease and in the same way as my lepers. I am very satisfied and very happy." After 16 years living with the disease, at the age of 49, on the first Monday of Holy Week, Father Damien passed away April 15th, 1889. He was buried under a hollow tree where he first stayed when he arrived here. Shortly after his death, in 1890, Father Damien's brother, Father Pamphile, at the age of 58, came as a replacement priest as the population of Kalipapa had reached 1,174 people. He stayed for 21 months, then returned to Europe. 47 years after Father Damien's death, President Franklin D. Roosevelt granted a request from King Leopold of Belgium, the return of the remains of Father Damien to his homeland, where he would be placed in an honored shrine in Louvain, Belgium. Pope John Paul in 1995 declared Father Damien, "Blessed Damien, servant of God, servant of humanity." The right hand of Damien was then returned to its original grave here in Kalawao, when on October 11th, 2009, Pope Benedict declares Damien Saint Damien, Hawaii's first saint. By 1937, more than 7,000 people had been exiled to Kalipapa, and the majority never left. 3,491 people died here, and the bones of thousands remain in unmarked graves that have been forgotten. Finally, in the 1940s, a cure was discovered: sulfane drugs. These drugs stopped the progression of this terrible disease. In 1969, the isolation policy was lifted and the patients were free to leave. Many of the patients who lived here said, "This is our only home and we have nowhere to go." So they were then allowed to stay here for the rest of their lives. In 1980, President Jimmy Carter signed legislation making Kalipapa a National Historic Park to be overseen by the National Park Service.
This park was established to honor the story of the people that lived at Kalaupapa and the social injustice that you've been learning about already, I'm sure. And it's really an example of how people can really discriminate and isolate and marginalize people just on the basis of maybe skin color, but in this case it was a disease. And so national park sites try to preserve and interpret and protect special places like Kalaupapa. So in 1980, Congresswoman Patsy Mink, along with many of the patients here at Kalaupapa, saw that many of the buildings were falling down and the grounds were becoming overgrown, that this place needed special protection to ensure into perpetuity that these important stories of Kalaupapa would be told forever.
Should you decide to visit Kalaupapa, the most popular way is on the back of a mule. The route takes you down a 1,664-foot poly trail, bending around 26 switchbacks in a little more than 3 miles. The views are stunning on the way down to the colony. The mules are not like horses, they are sure-footed. They can see all 4 hooves when they walk forward. They stop, calculate, and then continue going down. This trip is fairly safe, and the mules know this trail. At the bottom of the trail, you are greeted by a guide from Damien Tours, a company owned by a former patient. Your group is assembled for a bus ride through the settlement with various stops. One of the stops is at St. Philomena in Kalawao, St. Damien's Church. Spiritually, while there you feel the presence of the suffering as you view the cemetery where St. Damien buried thousands of people. Near the conclusion of your tour, a picnic lunch is served near the overlook of Kalawao, this beautiful but rugged bay where the first lepers were dumped in 1866. At the end of the tour, you mount up on your donkey and ride out up the cliffs. As you ride out, you can't help but think of the 8,000 outcasts who had no say in their fate. But now the remaining patients will have the dignity of concluding their stay on their terms.